buceta, caralho, porra, vai tomar no seu cu. Agora foi, filha da puta. Essa merda. Incógnita do colégio, ser Peter Marques falando, bem-vindos ao Assistindo Porcaria, mas começamos de Ridiculamente Questionável da Webcam 56, dia 30 de 8 de 2025, mas sei lá o que, 25, não é 257 não. Caralho, tomando cu, porra. Perdi o troço, caralho. Onde foi que caiu essa merda, porra? Que? E vamos procurar porcaria pra assistir. Na verdade eu assisti, mas é aquilo, foda-se, não importa. Mas que. Toma no cu, essa porra vai desconectar agora cada 5 minutos, buceta. Que tão enfiando seu culo, bosta. Essa buceta ontem, seu pedaço de lata de merda. Vem, porra. Ai, você mesmo. Te fuder, da última vez que eu fiz essa merda, desconectou de tudo, seu saco de merda de. Caralho. Filha da puta. Te fuder, Google. Cibersegurança é caralho, sabe? Porque é só pra ser inconveniente com os outros. Chupa minha rola, Google. Eu vou digitar minha pica no seu cu, seu buceta seca do capeta. Pai, eu vou te saquear o Google. Que te fuder, chupa minha rola, assim, tá certo, assim, seu... Mama ovo do quinto dos infernos. Me tá doando, seu pedaço de lixo. Estúpido. Tomar um cu. Saco de merda do caralho. Porra, desconectou de tudo agora. Tomando um cu, Google, seu esquiva. Come bosta do caralho. Pariu, não, foda-se, seus come merda. Vai comer bosta na casa do capeta. Deixa eu ver se tá conectado pelo menos o Bandcamp aí, ou se tudo desconectou, seu saco de estrume do capeta. Verificação de segurança, verificação de tamanho micropênis, porra. Qual é? Usa essa merda hoje de manhã, seu chupa-rola do capeta. Qual é? Tomar no seu cu, Google. Saco de merda do capeta do satanás. Desconecta tudo. Tudo. Ah. Tomar no cu, faz a versão de computador ser uma merda pra ver se todo mundo se mata, né? Saco de merda do capeta. Saco de merda do capeta. Segurança o caralho essa bosta. Isso aí é coisa do capeta. Fudeu os caras que vivem vendendo informação pessoal dos outros. Tá preocupado com segurança do caralho. Isso é tudo só pra ser inconveniente na vida das nossas infelizes vidas, caralho. Pá, eu achei que já pica no seu cu, seu merda. Faz logo a merda desse login, filha de uma puta. Corno do caralho, ingrato da porra. Me capte a porra. Tá achando que eu sou o que? Palhaço? Filha de uma puta. Eu vou identificar a puta, a porra do seu tio nessa merda, caralho. Bando de filho da puta do caralho sem amor à própria vida. Desconecta de tudo. Nossa, segurança de merda, Google. Vocês deviam ir pro colo do capiroto. Sisteminha de merda, cara, que vocês têm. E tem que esperar boa vontade merda do YouTube funcionar, né, caralho? Vai logo, infeliz do caralho. Eu não tenho que reconectar a Twitch depois de subir essa de live lá no lixo YouTube. Depois, puta que pariu. Infeliz do caralho, chupa minha pica, saco de estrume. Violação de direito autoral é direito humano, porra. Ainda tira todas as minhas configurações. Odeio modo claro em tudo. Odeio tema claro. Porra. Das coisas desconecto depois. Aí puta que pariu. O YouTube vai te desde o saco de merda.
Bom dia, Vietnã. Meu nome é Matheus504 e eu tô cometendo falsidade ideológica. Já aconteceu de você reassistir o filme favorito da sua infância e perceber que só achava que ele era bom porque lembrava com a nostalgia de uma criança, mas agora que é velho percebe que na verdade ele era bem ruim? Comigo não aconteceu porque meu favorito era Homem-Aranha 2, mas se fosse pra acontecer, eu sempre achei que seria com Deu a Louca na Chapeuzinho. Um dos maiores hits da locadora do meu bairro, porque eu tava sempre alugando. Meu apelido lá era Faxineiro, não sei porquê, nunca me explicaram. Deu a Louca na Chapeuzinho era um filme punk, que desafiava tudo que uma animação devia ser. E eu digo isso no sentido que não parece uma animação, mas sim um pesadelo febril. Mas sem brincadeira, eu digo que ele é punk no sentido literal da palavra. Não que ele é anarquista e drogado, mas ele tem uma narrativa bem comum pra um desenho infantil. Zomba, os contos de fada. E ainda por cima, eu tenho essa informação aqui, ele foi o primeiro longa-metragem de animação de computador a ser financiado de forma totalmente independente, sem nenhum grande estúdio produzindo. E pra mim não tem nada mais punk que fazer o que você quer, e não o que a sociedade diz que você tem que fazer. Talvez quebrar uma guitarra. É por ele ser independente que eu acho injusto chamar ele de ruim só por causa da animação. Ele não tinha uma Pixar ou uma DreamWorks produzindo, era um independente químico. E essa piada não tá tão longe da realidade, porque o cara que financiou o filme inteiro sozinho era o Maurice Kambar, o criador da Vodka Sky. Esse filme foi feito por um alcoólatra, segundo injustiça aí, independente, feito por um nóia. O Maurício tinha um sonho de produzir filmes, mas acabou produzindo só dois, Deu a Louca na Chapeuzinho e Deu a Louca na Chapeuzinho 2. Essa só não é a melhor filmografia do mundo porque tem a do George Miller. Na hora de fazer o filme, o Kamber olhou pro dinheiro que ele tinha e viu que não era muita coisa, então ia ter que economizar onde fosse possível. Se animasse nos Estados Unidos, ia sair muito caro. Então onde era o lugar mais barato que ele podia animar esse filme? Venezuela. Nem fudendo. Filipinas. Beleza. Kambar voa para as Filipinas e chegando lá ele pergunta: Olá, Filipinas Animations. Quanto vai custar para animar meu filme? Olá, Kambar, criador da Vodka Sky. Vai custar tanto? Nem fudendo. Aí o Kambar teve a melhor ideia da vida dele. Segunda melhor, né? A primeira é a Vodka Sky, deixou ele milionário. Só um alcoólatra acorda um dia e pensa: eu vou criar uma vodka chamada Sky, com 2Y. Aí o Kambar se ligou: se eu criar meu próprio estúdio de animação, eu posso escolher o quanto eu vou pagar para eles animarem meu filme. Então ele criou a Kambar Animation, com 2 N's. Aí ele pegou os melhores animadores das Filipinas e perguntou para eles: vocês têm alguma experiência com cinema? Ô Kambar, criador da Vodka Sky. Claro que sim, a gente já fez vários filmes de sucesso. Ótimo, porque eu só quero os melhores aqui, trabalhando com meu filme. Quanto vocês querem de salário? A gente quer tanto. Nem fudendo. O critério do Kambar parou de ser quero os melhores e passou a ser quero animadores SAPCB. sei abrir o programa e cobro barato. Kanban Animation ficou infestada de iniciantes. Alguns deles tiveram que aprender a animar enquanto faziam o filme. Imagina o tanto de tutorial de indiano que eles assistiram. E eu estranhei toda essa história do pouco dinheiro que eles tinham, porque os dubladores eram todos famosos. Enquanto eu li, eu tava achando que o Kanban deu 1% do orçamento pra animação e 99% pra Anne Hathaway dublar Chapeuzinho. Mas esses dubladores foram adicionados depois que o filme já tava pronto. Os dubladores originais, pra poupar dinheiro, eram todos amigos pessoais do Kanban. Eu tento não falar palavrão pro vídeo ficar feio. Family friendly, mas eu vou ter que falar aqui. Esse cara é um fudido. Tinha dinheiro pra porra nenhuma. Um dos traços do alcoolismo é administrar mal o dinheiro. Os dubladores novos foram adicionados depois que o filme foi exibido no Festival de Cannes. E eu vou te dar 5 segundos pra absorver a informação de que esse filme passou no Festival de Cannes. Né? A plateia gostou tanto do filme no festival que uma grande produtora entrou num acordo com o Kanban de que ela distribuiria o filme por todo o mundo em troca de uma parte dos lucros. E aí pagaram os dubladores novos do bolso deles. E eu tô evitando falar qual que era a produtora pra não dizer que era do Harvey Weinstein. Mas te falar, nenhuma dessas informações até aqui me surpreendeu. Faz muito sentido esse filme ser independente. Faz muito sentido ele ter sido feito por iniciantes das Filipinas. E faz todo o sentido do mundo ele ter sido criado por um alcoólatra. Só que eu achava que ele só tinha feito sucesso aqui no Brasil. País do Ratatouille, do Boca de 09. Qualquer coisa faz sucesso aqui. Menos você, o único fã de Ratatouille do mundo acabou de comentar isso. A piada é que o fã é do Ratatouille e não do Boca de 09. Mas na verdade, ele foi um sucesso absoluto de bilheteria. O orçamento dele foi de 8 milhões de dólares e a bilheteria foi de 110 milhões. Isso é um aumento de muitos por cento. Isso me deixa feliz porque eu gosto do filme. Ele é mal animado? Sim. O roteiro é maluco? Sim. É um plágio de Shrek? Sim. O filme é ruim? Sim. Mas ele é bom? Sim. Ele é horrível e em certos momentos terrível. Mas a comédia e ousadia dele acabam compensando seus efeitos. E toda namorada que eu já tive falou essa frase sobre mim. Mas o que faz esse filme ser tão bom, além de ser a história de superação de um alcoólatra? A resposta curta é o roteiro. A resposta longa é que o que faz esse filme ser tão bom é o roteiro. Meu último vídeo foi sobre o Osama Bin Laden, e eu tinha feito uma piada que ninguém nunca mais ia querer patrocinar esse canal. Mas acabou aparecendo alguém, o jogo Vibe City. Por que será? Um jogo mobile no estilo GTA RP em que você pode ser quem você quiser, seja um mineiro ou um lenhador. A empresa quer que eu falo que você pode ser um empresário gigantesco, um rei do crime, mas o que eu gostei mesmo é o lenhador. Quer dizer, eu quero ser lenhador. Você pode jogar em tempo real com outras pessoas e tem chat de voz e de texto pra vocês cortarem bastante madeira junto. E com o dinheiro que você ganhar cortando madeira, você pode comprar carros, tunar eles, revender eles. E aí comprar moto, iate, ser bombeiro, disputar a corrida e transportar a madeira que você cortou. Link na descrição e no comentário fixado, pode baixar na Play Store ou na Apple Store. E usando o código Mateus, você ganha dinheiro, carro e uma skin legal. Pra fazer esse vídeo, eu assisti esse filme de novo 6 vezes. Estragou meu Letterboxd. Só que ele tinha um nome diferente no stream que eu usei. Ele chamava Deu a Louca na Chapeuzinho, filme português Brasil completo, desenho e animação dublado HD. E apesar de dublado e completo, não era HD não. Mas eu acho que ele não foi nem feito em HD. Uma coisa que parte meu coração é que o resto do mundo nunca vai ver esse filme dublado em português. Que é o jeito certo de assistir. O vilão chama Good Bandit, que seria bandido do docinho. Na dublagem, ele é o bandido guloso. Se pelo menos tivesse alguma piada pra eu fazer com esse nome. O Nick Flippers, em português, é o Inspetor Piruleta. O lobo mau em inglês é Big Bad Wolf, o grande lobo mau. Aí diminuiu a masculinidade dele. Bob Parr, nem é do mesmo filme, fiquei sem exemplo. Robert Parr, Roberto Pera. Beto Pera. Bob é Beto. Bebeto seria Bobob. O nome original do filme era uma palavra. Aí creio eu que o tradutor tomou uma garrafa inteira de vodka Sky e traduziu uma palavra pra Deu a Louca na Chapeuzinho, que é 1000 vezes melhor que Hoodwinked. Hoodwinked significa enganado e é também um trocadilho com a palavra hood, porque em inglês Chapeuzinho Vermelho é Little Red Riding Hood, né? Não. Não é não. Chapeuzinho vermelho em inglês é Little Red Hat. Riding Hood é outra coisa. Riding Hood é um gorro de equitação. Você tá entendendo o que eu tô falando? A Chapeuzinho Vermelho não usa chapéu. Ela é a gorrinho de equitação vermelho. A lacração tirou até isso da gente. Agora me diz, quando você pensa num filme da Chapeuzinho Vermelho, o que não pode faltar? Exatamente. Mentiras, polícia e karatê. Pelo menos assim como o alcoólatra lembraria dessa história. Vendo esse filme... Que isso? Vendo esse filme, a primeira coisa que um cinéfilo como eu repara, eu já vi mais de 100 filmes, é que esse filme segue a mesma estrutura de um dos clássicos do cinema japonês, Rashomon. Em ambos os filmes, um crime acontece, e aí cada personagem conta uma versão diferente de como eles se lembram desse crime acontecendo. Isso é um desenho pra criança, e sua maior inspiração é um filme do Akira Kurosawa, e Shrek 2. Mas e a história do filme? Que isso? Mas e a história do filme? Como que é? Obrigado, Matheus, pela excelente pergunta. O filme começa com a história do Chapeuzinho que a gente já conhece. Lobo na cama, vovó amarrada, lenhador salvando o dia. Só que nesse filme nós vemos a continuação disso, que é a polícia sendo chamada no local por uma denúncia de briga familiar, envolvendo os crimes de invasão a domicílio, lobo faminto e porte ilegal de machado. Para eles, um crime. Pra minha família, terça-feira. Mas a suspeita da polícia e do inspetor Piruleta é que os crimes podem ter algo a ver com o bandido guloso. Ainda não pensei numa piada. Ele é um marginal que tava roubando todas as receitas de doces da floresta e causando um enorme estrago na economia. Porque ao que parece, todos os comércios da floresta são de doces. Tem umas 50 lojas de doces numa única rua. É como se eles fossem viciados em açúcar. O Felipe Neto tinha razão, mas se vocês me permitem ser um pouco chato, já estão me permitindo há mais de 20 anos. Eu sei que a magia do cinema é que as coisas não precisam fazer sentido na vida real. Ainda mais um desenho pra criança, que tem um lobo falante. Mas pelo amor de Deus, por que que as lojas estão fechando só porque roubaram as receitas? Só tinha uma cópia? Ninguém sabe fazer os doces de cor? Todo mundo tem Alzheimer? Por causa do açúcar? Será que o açúcar causa perda de memória? O Felipe Neto tinha razão.
O épico jogo de ação online War Thunder permite mergulhar em batalhas colossais e testemunhar todo o poder de veículos militares.
E comer! Já é de se esperar que vai acontecer muita coisa maluca num filme idealizado pela mente perturbada de um alcoólatra. Essa é a piada que eu mais tô gostando de fazer. Mas tem algumas coisas em específico que nunca são explicadas. E elas estão me deixando acordado à noite. Isso e o sorriso dela. E o meu agiota. A primeira delas é que o Piruleta anda com um cachorro na coleira. Por quê? Se os animais aqui são gente, eles falam, eles pensam, eles têm sentimento, eles andam em duas patas, eles sabem o certo e errado. Pra que a coleira? Aí você me fala, talvez seja outro tipo de animal. Talvez ali tenha dois tipos de animal. Um que é racional e outro que ele sabe ler e escrever. Ele tá ali por opção. É um fetiche. Eles começam a contar suas versões daquele dia, começando com nossa protagonista, a Chapeuzinho, que de acordo com a polícia é parente da vovó. Aí eu te pergunto, o nome dela é vovó? Tá escrito no RG? Vovó da Silva? Ou vovó é vulgo? A Chapéu leva uma vida normal de uma criança de 12 anos, ela anda de bike e entrega iFood. É nessa hora que eles pegam a gente desprevenido e nos acertam com um golpe atordoante, revelando que o filme é um musical. E isso é uma das coisas mais canalhas de Hollywood. Eu gosto de musical, mas você tem que estar no mindset certo pra ver um musical. Não pode pegar assim, de calça riada. Devia ser crime federal fazer um musical disfarçado de normal. Percebeu que eu rimei minhas palavras agora? É porque no roteiro original eu ia mandar uma música agora, né? Uma piada, né? Que o vídeo do nada ia virar musical. Só que eu resolvi não seguir o roteiro porque no último verso da música eu xingo a Polícia Militar do Estado de São Paulo, que é o estado que eu moro. Eu não lembro como eu cheguei nesse verso, mas é melhor não cantar, porque eu tenho depressão, eu quero me matar, mas não quero morrer. Independente de tudo, nem dá tempo de você ficar puto com o musical. Porque exatamente 26 segundos depois, um cara vestido de urso zebra aparece. E de primeiro momento você pensa, ah, ele deu uma olhadinha suspeita pros lados, o que no mundo do cinema significa que ele é o vilão. O plot twist pros personagens é que eles acham que ele é animal, mas na verdade é um ser humano. E aí eles vão descobrir que o bandido estava entre eles o tempo todo. Mas não! Ninguém nunca explica porque ele tá vestido assim. Nenhum, aquele é o velho Thomas, nós aceitamos ele como um de nós. Não, ele só tá lá. O que dá a entender que ele é muito pior que um bandido que rouba famílias inocentes. Ele é um furry. Felca. Ideia de vídeo. Furrização. O vilão verdadeiro do filme devia ter até um certo mistério quando você era criança. Mas quando você é adulto, você vê que é o coelho. É 100% coelho. Não tem chance no mundo de ser outra pessoa a não ser o coelho. Olha pra cara dele. E eu queria falar uma teoria minha, se me permitem. O furry tem a única loja de doce que não é roubada. De novo, a desculpa perfeita pra ele ser um vilão. Minha teoria é, ele não foi roubado porque ele é amante do coelho. E pode falar que fui eu que falei.
Você assistiu 100 filmes, assistiu?
Eu já vi 100 filmes.
Obrigado, Chapeuzinho. Sempre posso contar com você, garotinha danada.
Garotinha danada, ela tem 12 anos. Por que ele tá chamando ela de danada? É o Drake, o dublador? Felca! Socorro! Como eu falei, a Chapeuzinho tem 12 anos, ou seja, ela é burra. E sabendo dos crimes do guloso, eu ainda acho que tô perdendo uma piada aí. Ela acha que é melhor tirar as receitas de um cofre de titânio e deixar elas com a vovó, uma idosa. Nem foi o coelho que abriu a porta do bonde, né? Ele nem tentou só pegar as receitas. Ele nem fez essa cara de vilão por não conseguir pegar. Pesquisando pra esse vídeo, eu descobri que na versão original do filme, o coelho era muito fofinho. Aí as crianças que assistiram na exibição teste começaram a chorar quando revelou que ele era o vilão. Aí tiveram que deixar bem óbvio desde o começo que ele era do mal pra não ter esse problema. Mas pra gente foi bom ela ter caído. Foi boa essa tentativa de assassinato de uma criança de 12 anos. Porque no chão ela encontra o lobo e esse esquilo fotógrafo, que é o ligeirinho. E eles resolvem o grande mistério.
A avó Bucket, a rainha dos doces.
Vovó é vulgo. O lobo quer roubar a cesta de Chapeuzinho e ela sai correndo, mas ele encurrala ela. Aqui eu percebi que a animação desse filme lembra muito Talking Man. E ela consegue escapar porque, convenientemente, ela tinha um spray anti-lobo na bolsa. Só que aí eu te pergunto, por que essa floresta não é um lugar mágico que todos os animais conseguem conviver uns com os outros? Então, eu vou falar. A Chapeuzinho é racista. O pior de tudo é que o Piruleta escuta essa história e fala que não teve nenhum crime. Um lobo tentou assaltar uma menina de 12 anos. E o Piruleta, é sua opinião. O veredito final dele é que o lobo não é um criminoso, só é esquisito. E não é crime ser esquisito.
A gente não prende as pessoas por serem esquisitas.
Ô, Bruce, sabe o cara preso do camburão?
O esquisito?
Isso, libera ele.
A Chapéu então encontra esse bode que só pode falar cantando porque foi enfeitiçado por uma bruxa da montanha 37 anos atrás. Uma desculpa de nível elite. Quem que vai tentar argumentar contra uma desculpa dessas?
Você só canta.
Isso mesmo.
Você falou agora! Acabou de falar!
Falei. Falei.
E é quando ele canta esse falei que o filme deixa de ser bom e passa a ser incrível. O bode aparece por só 5 minutos. E ainda assim ele consegue ser o personagem mais icônico desse filme. Sem brincadeira, essa cena dele é uma das melhores coisas já feitas na história do cinema. E eu tenho propriedade pra falar disso. Eu já vi 100 filmes. Essa parte é tão absurdamente boa que eu fiquei embasbacado quando eu descobri que quase cortaram o bode do roteiro. Ele só não foi cortado porque mostraram um desenho dele pras crianças teste e elas gostaram tanto que resolveram deixar ele ali. O que eu tô entendendo de tudo que eu ouvi até aqui é que as crianças teste salvaram esse filme. Elas eram mais responsáveis que esse alcoólatra. Daqui a pouco a gente vai descobrir que elas não deixaram ele colocar o Mussolini como um dos personagens. A Chapeuzinho fala pra ele, bode, eu preciso de um atalho pelas montanhas, senão minha avó vai morrer. E ao invés de ele ter senso de urgência e levar ela pro atalho e salvar logo a véia, ele fica cantando por 3 minutos sobre como ele conhece um atalho. E ele deixa claro que ele conhece o atalho porque ele é precavido. Ele é muito orgulhoso disso.
Precaver, se não quer pagar pra ver.
Ele compra por encomenda vários chifres diferentes, um pra cada situação. Imagina ele do computadorzinho dele, checando o Mercado Livre. Eles pegam o atalho do bode, que é um bondinho nos trilhos. Aí vem uma avalanche de neve. Ele tá cantando durante tudo isso, inclusive. A avalanche vem forte. Ela tá indo direto em direção a eles. E é então que o ser mais precavido do mundo, mais precavido que o próprio Batman, ele olha pra trás. Ele vê a avalanche. E então ele tem a humildade de dizer:
Uma avalanche vindo e não deu pra precaver.
precisou de uma avalanche pra pegar o bode vacilando. Os trilhos acabam e eles saem voando pelo céu. E o bode, que provavelmente é cristão, fica bestificado com as maravilhas da criação de Deus. Aí a Chapeuzinho, que é agnóstica, tem uma visão do inferno e vê a vovó mandando ela usar o capuz. Ela faz isso e foda-se o bode, larga ele pra morte. Eu tava gritando pra TV nessa hora: cadê o bode? Cadê o bode? O cinema tem poder de mudar vidas. Aí a Chapeuzinho chega na casa e o resto vocês já sabem. Vamos pra história do lobo. Ele é um repórter chamado Wolf W. Wolf. O que será que é o W? Ele tava investigando o guloso já há alguns meses e, assim, o lobo claramente é negro. Mas, de alguma maneira, que eu não sei explicar, mesmo ele sendo animal e negro, ele ainda assim conseguiu fazer blackface. Ele, além de repórter, é drag queen e usa esse superpoder para se disfarçar em qualquer situação. Ele é o David Bowie da floresta. A maioria das piadas é que eu sou burro.
A Dalva me mandou vir aqui dar uma olhada.
Quem?
Sua chefe, Dalva.
É Maria.
Foi o que a Maria disse. Ela disse, Dalva, pra você vir aqui, aí eu vim aqui.
O cinema tem poder de mudar vidas. Eu queria entender por que nessa cena eles agem como se o lobo fosse o estranho e não um ser humano vestido de animal. O fotógrafo dele é o ligeirinho que fala fino e rápido porque ainda tá na puberdade. E ele é o único personagem bonitinho do filme. Indo atrás de informações do guloso, meu primo tá no 3º filho. E eu tô aqui falando do guloso. E eu ainda não pensei numa piada pra isso. Indo atrás de informações do guloso, os dois vão pra uma fazenda que tem um rebanho de ovelhas. Por que que existe fazenda nesse mundo? E por que que elas estão assim, presas? Ele ainda fala que elas vão ser tosquiadas. Isso dá a entender que nesse mundo, os produtos de animais ainda vêm dos animais. O que significa que quando eles fazem doce de leite, é o leite de um deles. E as ovelhas aqui, presas, sabe o que a gente tá vendo, Brasil? Eu falo com o Brasil inteiro. A gente tá vendo um campo de concentração num filme infantil. Olha o ligeirinho, que lindo de ovelha. Na versão do lobo, o encontro dele com a Chapeuzinho é bem diferente. Ela, por ser racista... Ô, louco. Ela, por ser racista, contou como se ele fosse um predador sinistro que queria roubar a cesta dela. Mas, na verdade, ele só era um predador, tentando roubar a cesta dela. Não era sinistro. Tava até de dia. E ela esqueceu de contar que ela espancou ele. Ela é campeã de karatê. É a Cobra Kai. Cobra Kai não tá na moda mais, né? Escrevi esse roteiro há uns anos. É óbvio que o coelho engana o lobo. E aí ele vai parar nos trilhos. Que é quando chega a piada favorita de quase todo mundo que viu esse filme.
Achei uma caixa de velas, e das grandes.
Uma caixa de velas? Acende uma. Essa vela ilumina bem. Qual é a marca dessas velas?
Dinamite. Deve ser americana.
9 do 9 do Mercado Livre. Ofertas imperdíveis.
Mercado Livre.
E eu vou responder pra vocês uma dúvida muito antiga. Em inglês, o ligeirinho acha que a dinamite é italiana. Dinamite! E é a explosão dessa dinamite que causa a avalanche na montanha. E isso me lembra de um paradoxo da filosofia chinesa, vindo lá do século III, que reflete sobre o que acontece quando um objeto imóvel conhece uma força imparável. A resposta é que a força ganha. De nada, China. Eles então vão na casa da vovó. O lobo faz o velho truque de se fingir de uma idosa. E o resto você já sabe. Agora, quando chega a vez do lenhador contar a história dele, esquece. Pula essa parte. Pelo amor de Deus, deleta ela do filme. Até quando eu era moleque, eu pulava essa parte. Olha que eu comia formiga. Meu padrão não era muito alto, não. Ela é mal animada, sem graça, quase inteira musical e não agrega em nada pra história do filme. Basicamente, ele é um ator que quer fazer um papel de um lenhador, mas ele é reprovado. Aí, 2 minutos depois, ele é aprovado. Porque dane-se a coerência. Ele vende doces pra essas crianças satânicas, enquanto ele canta uma música que mais parece um ritual satânico. Alguém rouba as rodas da van dele. Quem será que foi? E o plano do coelho é que ele sabia que o lenhador era tão burro que se ele ficasse sem carro, ele ia desmatar a floresta inteira. Como ele chega nessa conclusão? Eu não sei. Aí ele corta uma árvore gigante, ela cai em cima dele e ele vai parar dentro da casa da vovó. E o resto vocês já sabem. Agora, a vovó, que tinha tudo pra ter a história mais chata de todas, porque ela é velha e carcomida, acaba contando uma história de esportes radicais e tiroteio. E não são sinais de demência, não. A véia é o Tony Hawk. Tem uma comunidade na internet de skatistas da terceira idade, e o Tony Hawk posta vídeo dele fazendo manobra nessa comunidade como se ele não fosse ninguém. Ele é o cara mais da hora do mundo. A véia vai participar de uma corrida de esqui, e é óbvio que tem uma banda de nu metal lá. Todo esporte radical tem que ter uma banda de nu metal. E ela dá todo esse sermão pra Chapeuzinho não andar com estranhos. Mas olha a galera que ela anda. Esse urso maconheiro o pinguim com raquitismo na cara. E que animal é esse? A corrida é contra os capangas do coelho, que tem o visual futurista mais anos 2000 possível. Os filmes dos anos 2000 tinham uma estética única do que seria o futuro pra eles. Tipo o Batman do futuro. Eu só queria uma desculpa pra falar do Batman do futuro. Os capangas então começam a derrubar todos eles do esqui. E eu acho engraçado que pra todos os personagens, o coelho tinha um plano super elaborado. Mas pra vovó, era só mata essa véia. Ela sobrevive, porque é óbvio que ela tem um bang jump. Mas o que me quebra é que ela aparece com 2 granadas, do nada. Primeiro, por que ela tem isso? É porte legal? Existe porte legal de granada? E segundo, por que ela não usou antes? Quando estavam tentando matar ela? E o pior é que ela joga as granadas à toa. Ela ia descer de qualquer jeito. Mas ela ganha a corrida pelo menos. Mas agora, infelizmente, chega o terceiro ato do filme. E a película acaba tendo uma queda inevitável em qualidade. Eu falei que eu vi 100 filmes. É que o diferencial do filme é a estrutura narrativa dele. E quando a história da vovó acaba também essa estrutura. Então ele perde todo o charme. Vira só um desenho normal feito por um alcoólatra. Mas pelo menos eles têm iluminação melhor que os filmes da Marvel. Em sua base secreta, o coelho canta uma música sobre o quão perturbado mentalmente ele é, igual Kanye West, e revela que o plano dele é explodir a floresta para construir uma metrópole, cheia de shoppings e fábricas. Ou seja, ele quer transformar a floresta em São Paulo. Esse é o plano mais maligno que eu já ouvi na minha vida. Mas a vovó, completamente dopada de ômega 3, derrota o coelho junto da Chapeuzinho. E o inspetor Piruleta convida todos para participarem da agência de detetive deles, que creio eu seja a história do 2. Eu tenho uma leve lembrança de assistir o 2 na Record, uns flashbacks do Vietnã, mas não lembro de nada dele. Ele também é feito pela Cambar Animation, só que dessa vez com mais dinheiro, que novamente foi mal administrado pelo Cambar e conseguiu entregar uma animação pior ainda. A Chapeuzinho conseguiu ficar mais feia. Tudo indica que o 2 só é horrível. Nem o roteiro parece salvar o filme. Mas se vocês quiserem, eu posso fazer um vídeo sobre ele algum dia. Algum dia. Agora não.
My work is easy because I use ClickUp. Here's how I keep track of all my tasks. I start by brain dumping everything I need to get done in a list view. Next, I set a priority and a due date to keep things on track. I create custom statuses to organize my progress exactly how I want it. I like to add the action items field so AI can show me the next steps. I add my teammates as watchers so they're in the loop. ClickUp makes work easy, from personal projects to running a multi-billion-dollar company. Click the link below to create your workspace for free.
How's it going, dudes? You ever nearly bankrupt a multi-million-dollar corporation on accident? You ever make a board game that makes somebody so mad that the Supreme Court nearly gets involved? You ever have someone walk up to you with life-changing money and just tell them to F off? Well, I've got one guy that managed to do all 3 of those things in less than a decade. Ralph Onspach, creator of the hit 1973 classic Anti-Monopoly. Anti-Monopoly is the subject of one of the craziest sagas in the history of the genre, as this simple bust-the-trust game has been embroiled in immense controversy, untold amounts of confusion, and multiple lawsuits that had the potential to completely unravel the entire board game market. This thing in my hands? Apparently one of the most important games ever published, and most of us have never even heard of it. So what I'm going to do here is try to learn you a little bit about what this thing is and what it did, including all of the whack crap that stemmed from its many courtroom appearances, like how it almost killed the entire Monopoly brand. Remember the Breaky courtroom drama, when they almost hired the Backstreet Boys to make a song about these things? This stuff is in a whole other league. But before we can figure out why this game caused so much trouble, we first need to know what the game even is. So let's dive barefoot and blindfolded into an absolute mess by taking a look at one of the most destructive board games in history, Anti-Monopoly. Anti-Monopoly is the 1973 title that sees players take up the roles of trust-busting lawyers who are attempting to break up the oligopolies, trusts, and monopolies that are holding the market hostage. You do this by moving around the board and purchasing indictments on the companies you land on, successfully busting a trust when you can manage to fill all of the indictment slots on a group. Social credit points are awarded for these and other actions, and the one with the most at the end wins both for themselves and for the economy. Okay, so first impressions with this one. Does this remind anybody of any other games in particular? Oh my gosh, they totally ripped off Connect 4! Yeah, upon first viewing, the Monopoly comparisons will start flying immediately, not helped by the fact that Monopoly is 60% of the game's title. However, there are several key distinguishing features here that would help separate the two in a purely hypothetical lawsuit. None of the spaces share the same names, the gameplay and win conditions are all completely different, the designs of all the components separate themselves very well. This could very easily be another late for the sky Dashopoly title and not find any legal trouble at all. Now, in terms of a Dash Monopoly title, we'll have to see how that goes later. Back to the game though, it does a very good job at looking at the problems of regular Monopoly and trying its best to avoid them. For example, you won't have to worry about one guy hoarding one property of each color, as once you have two indictments on one group, you get assigned to that case. So no one else can try to take it from you, and if you complete it, then they'll need to pay you supervisory payments to keep an eye on those dastardly monopolies. Oh, you can trust me, buddy. These Google guys, they're not going anywhere. What's funny about this game is that you are all trying to work together to break up as many trusts as possible, but you are still trying to be the #1 buster as well. Each player has their own budget, their own cases, and can take out their own loans to help out. And once the first player runs out of money, you see who has the most points to determine the winner. Alright, good job everybody. We did only manage to break up the Auntie Anne's Pretzelopoly before Steven bankrupted himself, but that means that Kevin officially gets the gold star sticker. We'll meet up again next year. Of course, any self-respecting game could always use a little chaos, which is where the mailbox cards come in, causing effects that can help or harm your missions, such as your testimony inspiring a tightening of antitrust laws, political pressure ruining all your hard work, the Supreme Court ruling for or against your interests, one of your key witnesses fleeing the country altogether, getting invited to address the Commonwealth Club, which I believe doesn't do anything, a monopolistic businessman getting appointed to the head of the antitrust division, you getting caught bugging the office of a fellow agent, or you receiving one of several accolades, like winning Trustbuster of the Year, making this year's Who's Who in Washington, or even getting promoted. All of which do absolutely nothing. Keep up the good work, sport. Overall, a pretty easy, simple game that helps you learn the bare essentials of the antitrust process if you haven't the slightest clue what any of that is, with it also being admittedly pretty funny sometimes. But
com a Udemy, você pode conquistar as habilidades que irão impulsionar sua carreira. Escolha dentre nossos cursos mais
But as this thing hit store shelves and subsequently started flying off of them, there was one group that was absolutely not laughing. Not laughing at all. So let's go now into super special awesome story time and see what led Parker Brothers to almost implode their entire gosh dang business. The year, December. Time, 1973. Ralph Anspach, econ professor at San Francisco State, publishes Anti-Monopoly to a decent opening, selling approximately 419,000 copies and bringing in nearly $1 million in revenue. This is what we in the business call a lot of freaking money. Not one to enjoy the sight of somebody having a good time, the Parker brothers saw the increasing popularity of Anti-Monopoly and said, "Hey, wait a minute. We're regular Monopoly," and promptly sent Professor Anspach a cease and desist letter telling him to stop producing the game, destroy any current copies that he has, change any future titles so that they focus more on the trust-busting action, and allegedly run an ad in the newspaper apologizing for all the trouble? I would not put this past a legal team to request, but I say allegedly here as we'll find out later that our good buddy Ralph is already leaving out some key info. Professor Anspach, upon receiving a legal threat from a massive corporation with a full-fledged legal department behind them, decides that the only reasonable course of action is to, of course, go to court and sue them first. That's a bold strategy, Cameron. Let's see how that plays out for him. With this move, the professor has now locked himself in a legal duel. His dinky team of 2 lawyers against the entire legal might of the General Mills Fund Group, who owned Parker Brothers at the time. This kicked off a nearly 10-year-long brawl between the two that included about every twist that you could possibly imagine until they just ran out of courtrooms entirely. And it's my job now to try to relay this nonsense to you in a way that is comprehensible at all. A tall task when I just spent 4 hours looking through the appeals. So to start us off on this crazy train, let's begin with the very first lawsuit on offer. Anti-Monopoly Inc. versus General Mills Fund Group, Northern District Court of California. Now, this is by far the most complicated story ever covered on here. In addition to most of the information coming in the form of legal documents, there are a ton of contrasting accounts all over the internet as to who did what when and what actually even happened. So what I'm going to do here is present the timeline of information in the order that events were given to the courts, with the info provided by the court documents being what I'm going with as my best source since they were the ones used to make the decisions. As an example of what I'm dealing with here, there is a documentary by PBS about this time period and Monopoly's history. And just by reading the documents of the case that they are talking about, they have gotten multiple things wrong. So with that, let's finally start this nonsense off. Plaintiff, Anti-Monopoly Inc., claims that the entire Monopoly trademark is completely invalid based on 2 factors. It was either never valid to begin with, or has since become generic enough to void the trademark altogether. So basically, they sent this man a cease and desist letter, and his first reaction was to try to completely destroy the Monopoly brand. Defendant, General Mills Fund Group, claims that the Monopoly trademark is, in fact, valid and enforceable, real shocker there, and that Anti-Monopoly is in violation of that trademark. Now, you may be wondering how in the heck the professor here is going to try to argue that Monopoly's trademark is invalid when it's been perfectly fine for the last 40-odd years. Well, he undertook quite the feat to try to make this happen, as his goal was to prove that the story that Parker Brothers had been selling America on the origin of Monopoly had been, in fact, a lie. Originally, the story of Monopoly started from Charles Darrow. A man down on his luck after the Great Depression comes up with a revolutionary idea for a board game about buying and selling properties. He pitches the idea to a struggling Parker Brothers, it becomes a massive hit, zippity-doo-dah, everyone's rich. Now, this story is all well and good, but as the professor began to look around, he noticed some inconsistencies. Mainly that in October 1933, Darrow got the copyright for the game before Parker Brothers received both the rights and a trademark for Monopoly in 1935. Well, during his search, he began to find an increasing number of reports of people who played a real estate property trading game as early as the 1920s. These games going by various names in different parts of the country like inflation, business, finance, and in multiple cases, Monopoly. What they are describing here is what the documentary calls a folk game, a game that is created and spread around an area due to people just making it up and telling others about it rather than a company creating and selling it. Examples of which being games like chess or tic-tac-toe. Well, this presented the professor with an interesting angle, as if he could prove that Darrow had simply commandeered an already established game, then he might be able to get Parker Brothers' entire trademark revoked. If you think you know where this is going from here, I wish it was that simple. The professor eventually gets into contact with a Charles Todd who knew Darrow, and he recounts that after inviting him over to play a game called Monopoly, Darrow liked it so much that he asked him if he could borrow the rules and the board. And later that year, a copyright for Monopoly in Darrow's name is suddenly established. Now, this wouldn't automatically win him the case. Regardless of whether or not Darrow stole the idea, this angle hinges on Monopoly being a widespread established game to get the trademark overturned. But to Parker Brothers, this is regardless a massive problem. What has just transpired in the last couple years is that they sent a cease and desist letter to shut down another game with Monopoly in the title, entered a legal battle that they couldn't control because Ralph sued first, and that guy they sent the letter to is now bringing people and evidence that proves the story they had been selling Monopoly on for the last 40 years was a complete lie, which, even if they won the suit, would become public information if this trial went through. So the totally not panicking, why do you ask, members of the Parker Brothers decide to try and curb this little mishap before things just get a bit out of hand. Hey, Ralph, buddy, pal, friend. Look, I know we've both said and done some things that we might regret, and the court costs are really starting to add up, what with all the preparation and lawyers and junk. So we've got a solution that we think would help both sides. We really like the game you made. Great game, by the way. Really gets the message across. In fact, we like it so much that we are willing to buy the rights to it so that it can be sold all over the country. We will give you $500,000 for the rights to Anti-Monopoly, and we will also give you an executive level position at Parker Brothers so that we can just put all of this behind us and you can keep making more great games. What do you say? Nah. Okay, sounds good. Hey, how did the settlement offer go? We are dead! And so the trial begins. We've got quite a battle for you today, ladies and gentlemen, with round one ready to start. First up, was Monopoly a generic term to describe real estate trading board games prior to the trademark? If so, the trademark is invalid. After the court spends, I kid you not, 6 consecutive paragraphs talking about wheat, the court eventually agreed that small groups of related people had played Monopoly in various parts of the country prior to Parker Brothers registering the trademark. However, the court concluded that this was insufficient to prove that the term was the common descriptive name of all real estate trading games. Basically saying that while the name Monopoly was thrown around here or there, similar games were also floating around going by different names like finance or inflation, which was true. Don't believe me? Look up Mr. Monopoly Inflation and see for yourself. As a result, the court ruled that Monopoly was not a generic term prior to the trademark. So this round goes to Sergeant General Mills. Round 2. Has Monopoly become a generic name since the trademark registration? What the court is trying to determine here is if the term Monopoly now refers to all real estate trading board games and not an individual game emanating from a single source. This would be a load of barnacles. What they are trying to see here is if it has just become common practice to refer to any real estate trading game as Monopoly. Not a Monopoly ripoff, not a Monopoly-like, not a Trump version of Monopoly. You would just call both of these games Monopoly, and that's it. This has happened with other products before, like trampoline or videotape, but this is absolutely not the case with Monopoly, as all of these real estate trading games cannot just be called Monopoly without massive confusion. If you invite me over for a game of Monopoly and you pull out Joel Harden's Mogul, I am going to cause quite the kerfuffle. The court also agreed with this sentiment, ruling that Monopoly had not become a generic name since its registration, awarding Round 2 also to Major General Mills. Round 3. Is anti-monopoly in violation of Parker Brothers' trademark on Monopoly? Yes, of course it is. Now, I am not a lawyer, so I don't know all of the intricacies of trademark law, but my guy, look at this! So, Round 3 also goes to Private General Mills, awarding them the 3-0 supermarket sweep and figuratively killing anti-monopoly. As a result of this lawsuit, Professor Anspach had to turn over all remaining copies of Anti-Monopoly to Parker Brothers, which they would treat with care and respect by literally killing Anti-Monopoly, trashing all 40,000 copies of the game that were given to them, and inviting journalists out to watch them bury the games in a landfill as some sort of show of force. They dug a mass board game grave and invited people out to take pictures like, haha, celebrating my big win. Coming to the conclusion that, well, we can't possibly do any worse, the professor's team appealed, bringing us to Anti-Monopoly Inc. versus General Mills Fun Group, The Appeal, Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. Alright, we're back and we've got some issues with the last case. First, we're appealing the court's decision that the Monopoly trademark is valid. Okay, in terms of originally valid or since it was trademarked? Both. We're also appealing the court's decision that anti-monopoly is in violation of that trademark. So you don't think the trademark's valid, but if it is, then you aren't in violation of it anyway? Yeah. Why didn't you go for that the first time then? Buddy, we're at the appeals court. I'm just taking swings here. The appeals court process is attempting to look over what was done in the original trial and see if everything was conducted properly. If not, then they may have to do a whole other trial to make sure that the process is done right. First up, no new information was added, everything was in line with the previous ruling. Yeah, this one still stands. Give us a little more time on that one. What? No. Wait a minute. Aw, they biffed it! In the first trial, the court decided that monopoly was not a generic term for all real estate trading games, and therefore is not generic. But this is not what they should have been looking for. The appeals court states that what they should have been evaluating, based on what anti-monopoly was trying to convey, was whether or not monopoly constituted its own genus. Okay, this one is tough, so bear with me here. They are saying, to the absolute best of my understanding, that the relevant product category is not all real estate trading games, but the game played by the rules of Monopoly. So, Monopoly. In order to decide the case properly, the first court needed to differentiate the meanings a particular and very popular board game and a game produced by a single company. To quote the judge's very easy to follow example, it may be that when a customer enters a game store and asks for Monopoly, he means, I would like Parker Brothers' version of a real estate trading game because I like Parker Brothers products. On the other hand, the customer may mean, I want a Monopoly game. Don't bother showing me anti-Monopoly or easy money or backgammon. I am interested in playing the game of Monopoly. I don't much care who makes it. The proper mode of analysis is to decide but one question, whether the primary significance of a term is to denote product or source. In making this determination, the correct genus-species distinction, that is, the correct genericness finding follows automatically. And that finding is? Well, I'm not gonna tell you, you figure it out. After spending all this time prattling on about how easy it would be to correctly find the answer to the generic question, the judge does not give an answer to the question, reverses the previous court's decision, and tells them that they're going to hold another trial in a few years, so you might want to go see if there's any more evidence out there. So not only has the appeals court match ended in a complete stalemate, but I honestly could not even tell you what they are even looking for to determine the winner anymore. My guy went up to his honorable judge bench and said, well, we don't know if when someone buys something, they're thinking I like this product or I like this company, and that's gotta count for something. Go ahead and think on that for about 2 years. So they sent these two schmucks on their merry way, and in 1981, they're back at the district court with some new stuff to hopefully close this one out for good. It's time for Anti-Monopoly Inc. versus General Mills Fun Group, the rematch. Northern District Court of California. In our third gosh dang matchup between these goobers, we are looking to primarily establish two things. One, is the Monopoly trademark still valid? And two, if it is anti-monopoly in violation of it? Each side has brought some new evidence in to help out their case, so let's take a look. The Landlord's game is name-dropped in the document, so at this point we know that the history is the Landlord's game was made, it spun off into all these little versions of real estate games across the country, and then those eventually led to Monopoly. It has been discovered that the Professor's game was not always called Anti-Monopoly, but was originally called Bust the Trust. After the game failed to take off, Ralph changed the name to Anti-Monopoly. And lo and behold, including the visage of an extremely popular product can really help yours get some traction in the market. This little detail was surprisingly omitted in the documentary. No new evidence has been provided for the trademark infringement portion, so both sides have pretty much agreed that if there is a trademark, this thing is not allowed. And surveys were put together by both sides in order to get a glimpse into the mind of the American consumer. Here's what they found. It is determined that the Professor's survey not only does a bad job at finding the right information, but it is pointed out that the survey is trying to skew the results in their favor by asking leading questions. It even fails at doing this right, as 1 out of 3 people who bought Monopoly said they did so mainly because they liked Parker Brothers products. The Parker survey is much less controversial, with it finding that 63% of people could correctly identify Monopoly as a brand name, and that 55% of people could correctly identify Parker Brothers as the maker of the game. That seems like a low number, but more than half is a pretty solid score. If you went up to random people on the street and asked them, hey, who makes Oreos? Do you think more than half of them would get it? Do you even know who makes Oreos? That's pretty much all the new evidence, so let's see what the courts are thinking this time. Is this gosh dang trademark still valid or not? 1. Generic before it was made. While it is confirmed that Monopoly was played prior to the patent, there is not enough evidence to show that Monopoly was played widely enough to constitute the status as generic. This combined with the fact that Darrow and Parker Brothers popularized their own original version of the game, the trademark was made properly. Slimily, yes, but not illegally. This has been the case pretty much since the beginning, so let's go to the problem child that can't quite seem to make up its mind. 2. Generic since it was made. This court is required by the appeal court to try to find that super easy answer to the genericness question that the last judge totally knew, but he wants to hear your answer first just to make sure that you know too. The new judge is very excited about this project, as you can tell from the tone of several of his quotes in the document. One fact which this court need not ignore is that most consumers, indeed an overwhelming proportion thereof, purchase any given product not out of goodwill or affection for the producer, but because they want or favor the product. Only a shareholder of the General Mills Fun Group could reasonably be expected to purchase a Parker Brothers game out of an affection or goodwill for the corporation. Accordingly, the Ninth Circuit's mandate that this court divine the primary significance of Monopoly in the consumer's mind must necessarily involve subtle inferences into the complex, convoluted mind of the American consumer, an unenviable task. Unless the Ninth Circuit standard is meant to foreclose the possibility of trademark protection for any producer of a unique game whose corporate name does not appear in the title of the game, example, Scrabble, then its test cannot be used here to thwart Monopoly's trademark rights. Ladies and gentlemen, Judge Spencer Williams, District Court of Fed Up With Your Crap. Coming as no surprise after that spiel, Monopoly is determined to primarily denote Parker Brothers, and the trademark is upheld yet again. So with the third court case in a row still not siding with the professor, there really is only one thing we can do from here. That's right, it's time to launch another appeal! My guy, there are only so many appeals before you hit the Supreme Court and can't go any further. Welcome one and all to Anti-Monopoly Inc. versus General Mills Fund Group, the rematch, the appeal, Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. What we're looking for this time is what we were looking for in all the other ones. Is the trademark valid? We've got a different judge for this appeal than the last one, so let's hope that this guy doesn't also speak in riddles, and we've also got a little more information that could be relevant to the case. We have finally properly nailed down the Monopoly origin for good thanks to a letter from the president of Parker Brothers himself in 1957, which reads the following. So far as we know, the Landlord's game, invented by Mrs. Elizabeth Maggie Phillips of Washington, D.C., was the basic game for both finance and Monopoly. Mrs. Phillips patented her game and we purchased her patent. Mr. Charles Darrow later made many improvements to the Landlord's game and called his game Monopoly.
O despertador não tocou, o trânsito estressou e a dor de estômago chegou. Se é gastro, é gastrol.
He too secured a patent which he assigned to us. Because of the fact that we purchased all three games, it does not make very much difference to us who invented either one of the games. During that 1934-1935 time period, Parker Brothers did indeed purchase the rights to not only Monopoly, but also other games like it, such as the Landlord's game and Finance, in order to keep those games from splitting the market share. With a now monopoly on Monopoly, they would slowly phase out the other titles until only Monopoly remained, allowing it to dominate store shelves. They were likely going to do the same to Anti-Monopoly had Ralph accepted their first offer, as Mrs. Phillips' game was eventually forgotten for several decades after it was sold for around $12,000 in today's money. So with this being the fourth court case about this, they've decided to re-examine every piece of relevant information to make sure that they get it right this time. And here's what they came up with. In terms of whether it was generic prior to the trademark, they have fully accepted the correct Monopoly timeline of Landlord's game, to small groups, to various titles, to Monopoly. When a small number of people use a particular thing and call it by a particular name, one which is not a common descriptive term for the thing, a person may appropriate the name and register it as a trademark. The purpose of the doctrine that generic terms cannot be made trademarks is to prevent the appropriation of a term that is already in wide use among those who are potential purchasers of the thing that the term describes. We agree with the trial judge's conclusion that Monopoly had not become generic before Parker Brothers registered it as a trademark. That was the easy one. That one never changed throughout the whole of the proceedings. But now, we hit the wackiest of crap. Part 2. Has Monopoly become generic since it was registered? Per the appeals court, in Anti-Monopoly 2, the district court also said this. Unless the Ninth Circuit standard is meant to foreclose the possibility of trademark protection for any producer of a unique game whose corporate name does not appear in the title of the game, example, Scrabble, then its test cannot be used here to thwart Monopoly's trademark rights. Nothing in our opinion in Anti-Monopoly 1 even hints at the relevance of whether or not the corporate name of the producer of the game appears in the title of the game. And our opinion does not foreclose the possibility of trademark protection of the name of a game that does not embody the corporate name of its producer. But our opinion does squarely hold as follows. Even if only one producer, Parker Brothers, has ever made the Monopoly game so that the public necessarily associates the product with that particular producer, the trademark is invalid unless source identification is its primary significance. So, what they are saying here, to the best of my understanding, is that it is absolutely still possible to not include the name of the producer in the name of the game and have a trademark, so long as the name of the game makes sure to link it back to the producer. How the heck are you supposed to do that? So, per their own words, you don't need to include Joel Harden's in the mogul title to hold a trademark. But you also can't just use mogul because it's a common English word that doesn't relate back to the producer. That would be seen as generic. So you just need to find a way to relate mogul back to the producer. Say, maybe by making the title Mogul Joel Harden. See, it's completely different. My honorable judge really got up in that chair and went, nothing we said shuts down the ability to have a name that doesn't mention the maker. And in the very next sentence, completely shuts down the ability to have a name that doesn't mention the maker. As we have seen, the district court relied in part upon the fact that General Mills and its predecessor have spent time, energy, and money in promoting and policing the use of the term monopoly. Even if 1/3 of the members of the public who purchased the game did so because they liked Parker Brothers products, that fact does not show that monopoly is primarily source indicating. The very survey on which the district court placed emphasis by italicizing its results shows that 2/3 of the members of the public who purchased the game wanted monopoly and did not care who made it. What they are proposing is that board games should work like prescription drugs, where you get a 20-year patent to sell your game, and then after that, anyone can make a generic copy of your title that they can also start selling. By their logic, Coup has another 7 years before I can just release my hit new game Regime Change, and there's not a dang thing they can do about it. To us, the evidence overwhelmingly shows that they very successfully promoted the game of Monopoly. But in doing it, they so successfully promoted Monopoly as the name of the game that it became generic in the sense that we use that term in trademark law. What they are saying here is that since the word monopoly is a standard English word that is just used on the daily, that it should not be able to be trademarked like this in terms of the title of a board game.
Ih, a Azia apareceu! Eu me apaixonei pela comida errada. Isso é cara de azia, sal de fruta Eno. Pra que viver com cara de azia se você pode estar sempre com cara de alegria? Eno.
Com a Udemy, você pode conquistar as habilidades que irão impulsionar sua carreira. Escolha dentre nossos cursos mais conceituados sobre.
Here is the following list of other games that would lose their trademark for using common English words based on their precedent. Risk, Battleship, Clue, Sorry, Careers, Pandemic, Talisman, Coup, Pit, Splendor, Masterpiece, Trouble, Wingspan, Operation Perfection, Mousetrap, and any other game where a common word is what makes up the title. Interestingly enough, I believe Twister might probably be fine here, as the game has nothing to do with a tornado. Finally, we enter a whole new level when we reach what the appeals court describes as the most important information for their decision: the conducted surveys. Oh good, and they've inspired so much confidence in their decision making thus far. First survey, the brand name survey. General Mills conducted a survey where they asked people whether they considered Monopoly to be a brand name or a common name. Brand name being something like Chevrolet, and common name being something like automobile. Okay, this could be interesting. This would get directly into the consumer's mind to see whether they see the title as generic or not. Let's see what the results say. Oh, sorry, we don't have the results, because the appeals court said the results of this survey had no relevance to the question in this case. That's exactly what you were looking for! You told them to go out, locate the correct genericness finding, they ask people as to whether they see the game as generic, and when they come back you say, this isn't what I wanted, then why did you ask for it? Under the survey definition, Monopoly would have to be a brand name because it is made by only one company. Yeah, welcome to how a brand works. You telling me only Ford makes Ford cars? Why hasn't anyone else tried that? Second survey. Anti-Monopoly survey this time, people were asked, Are you familiar with business board games of the kind in which players buy, sell, mortgage, and trade city streets, utilities, and railroads, build houses, collect rents, and win by bankrupting all other players, or not? About 53% said that they were, and those people were then asked, if you were going to buy this kind of game, what would you ask for? That is, what would you tell the sales clerk that you wanted? About 80% of them said Monopoly. What the heck game were the other 20% thinking of? Okay, it's a board game, you buy properties, you buy railroads, you build houses, you can mortgage properties. You ever heard of this before? Oh yeah, dude, I love backgammon. The appeals court says that this works for the case, partially because they've got money on the anti-monopoly money line, and partially because we think that the results of this survey are compelling evidence of a proposition that is also dictated by common sense. An overwhelming portion of those who are familiar with the game would ask for it by the name Monopoly. Dude, they remembered the name of a product they enjoyed? Can't be having that. Third survey, the motivation survey. Remember the anti-monopoly survey that was thrown out of the last court due to the slight issue of it being overwhelmingly prone to errors of subjective grading? Yeah, they allowed that back in as evidence because... Fourth survey, the Tide survey. General Mills submits a survey from Tide, where people were asked if they primarily buy Tide because they like the Tide detergent or because they liked Procter & Gamble's products, with 68% saying that they bought it because they liked the detergent. You may have recognized that this question is almost exactly the same as the anti-monopoly survey that was just admitted, where they asked, did you buy Monopoly due to liking the product or because you like Parker Brothers products? The appeals court didn't think so, saying that the results in the Tide survey are of no relevance to this case. Surely, they must have a dang good explanation for this one, because I'm about to call for an investigation. Quote, there were various respects in which the survey was different from the motivation survey used by anti-monopoly, but we shall not suddenly attach great importance to technical considerations. Oh yeah, there are tons of reasons why this one is different than the other one, but we're just so busy that we couldn't possibly take the time to explain them. Just take our word for it, bro. They better be glad that a jury trial wasn't given. If we had fans in the stands for this, they'd be throwing beer bottles on the court like we're in gosh dang Cleveland. And after our honorable Judge Yapper finally wraps up his spree, we are finally able to hear the final verdict. We hold that finding 2 is clearly erroneous because, although there is some evidence to support it, our examination of the evidence leaves us with the definite and firm conviction that a mistake has been committed. We hold that, as applied to a board game, the word monopoly has become generic, and the registration of it as a trademark is no longer valid. We freaking won? Parker Brothers has just lost not only the suit, not only all the money in attorney fees, but also their entire right to the Monopoly trademark altogether. And the worst part is, I can't even be happy about it because I just witnessed the biggest instance of ref ball I've ever seen in my life. What the heck was that? My guy got into his judge chair and made a call so bogus, even the opposing team went, ooh, that's bad. Again, I am not a lawyer, so I could be missing something here, but it's gotta mean something that after reading and rereading these cases for hours, every time the district court explained their findings, I went, oh yeah, okay, I can see where they're coming from there. And every time the appeals court explained their stuff, I'm frozen from reading the dumbest sentence I've ever seen in my life. Parker Brothers got hit by the biggest screw job I've seen in all my days, and I'm just standing on the sidelines shouting, ref, please, throw the flag, my guy's getting murdered out there. But there will be no flag. There will never be a flag. The ref's already thinking about Cancun. I honestly believe that what happened is that the appeals court got so butthurt from the district court pointing out their garbage in the third case that they went, oh, you're taking shots at me? You're talking noise at me? You're shaking my bag of cats, little bro? Well, guess what? I'm revoking your decision. Parker Brothers, your trademark's no longer valid. Hee-haw. As a result of this win, Anti-Monopoly is now able to properly return to producing and selling their game. And as a hilarious bonus, Parker Brothers also needs to reimburse Ralph for every copy of the game they destroyed in that little celebratory extinction event that they hosted. Good! Remember kids, never start showboating until the game is over. But that little mishap is far from the biggest problem Parker Brothers is worried about right now. You see, with no trademark on Monopoly, anyone is now able to make and sell their own version of the game, turning Monopoly into a chess-type title that will absolutely kill the company. So what do you do when you think the court has screwed you over? Why, you appeal, of course! And with no appeal courts left above this one, there is only one place left that this case can go. Straight to the Supreme Court of the United States of America. Tensions are high. This is the last chance for both parties, both with everything on the line. The highest court in the country about to hear the case for what could decide the future of trademark validity in America as a whole. Let's go now to the Supreme Court cam to see their first reaction. What is this? Board game crap? I don't have time for this. Just go with whatever the last guy said. They outright refused to hear the case. Parker Brothers has permanently lost. There is nothing they can do about it.
The makers of the popular board game Monopoly today drew a chance card and lost, for real. They didn't go to jail, they didn't pass go, but lost their monopoly on Monopoly.
Quite a few Monopoly has lost its monopoly on Monopoly stories were printed that next week, and our beloved professor could finally rest easy knowing that his legal troubles were over. But quite a few people were concerned as to what this ruling meant for other trademarks across the US. Parker Brothers has maintained that such an interpretation of the law could have a devastating economic impact on companies. But Robin Rolfe, executive director of the United States Trademark Association, said it is still too early to see what the real impact will be. Perhaps it will have no impact. That would be our greatest hope. Now, you might be sitting there thinking that, wow, that guy was right. Generic monopolies haven't flooded the market, and companies still carry on like normal with their trademarks. What gives? Well, those execs across the nation were shaking and quaking in their boots for what this could do to their bottom line until they remembered their oldest and greatest tool that they could use to protect corporate interests. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, it's time for another exciting round of Money in Politics! Gets them every time. Recognizing that spending a ton of money now is better than losing all future money forever, Parker Brothers rounded up some of its corporate pals and began lobbying like there's no tomorrow. And I kid you not, it took them the sum total of 8 months in order to get the Trademark Clarification Act of 1983 read by the Senate. Good. Glad that we can act clearly and quickly on the things that actually matter. It took approximately a year to get it through the congressional system, but it made it through there nonetheless. And with all of their hard work, the Lanham Act was amended in 1984, making it so a registered trademark has not become generic and therefore cancelable solely because such mark is also used as a name of or to identify a unique product or service. Makes the primary significance of the mark to the relevant public rather than purchaser motivation the test for whether or not the mark has become generic. In short, it means that in order for the trademark to be lost, it would need to follow the same path as, say, air fryer, which was a trademarked product name until it became used to describe any type of these air frying devices. Other examples of names that used to be trademark include flip phone by Motorola, aspirin, which Bayer still has in some countries, and heroin? Somebody once had a trademark on heroin? Oh, let's see. Name brand heroin is a lot better, but Great Value's hotshot juice is cheaper. This set of rules does make a lot more sense than whatever the heck that last judge was spouting off, but it is unfortunate that they got to this by bribing their way into it. And as a result, Parker Brothers has officially regained control of the Monopoly trademark. Whew, that was a close one. But now that we got that taken care of, we should be able to keep this company up and running for quite some time. Now, this is not the end of the story, but it is the end of my collection of court documents and congressional announcements. So from here on out, we are going to be dealing with tons of contrasting reports and timeline gaps that make it pretty hard to pin down the truth. Heck, that documentary from earlier straight up said that Ralph appealed to the Supreme Court and they ruled in favor of him, which A, Ralph had already won at that point, and B, the Supreme Court never even heard the case. As a result, this section's gonna be a lot more hazy than the rest, but there is still a lot to unpack. First, with Monopoly now back in control of its own trademark, this once again opens the door to possible legal trouble with anti-monopoly. Hooray. But after everything they had already been through, both sides were kind of just like, do you want to go back in there? No. Do you? Heck no! And decided to settle out of court. The details are a little fuzzy. Some say that anti-monopoly was excluded from the Monopoly trademark and could still sell the game without issue. Others say that Ralph sold the rights to them but kept the rights to his other game. All that we know for sure is that at some point between 1984 and 1991, Ralph would sell the rights to anti-monopoly to Parker Brothers, who then licensed the game back to him to be sold on the market. This little alliance would continue seamlessly and without issue all the way up until it didn't anymore. Shocker, I know. More on that later. Another interesting thing that happened during this time period was another little game released by the name of Gay Monopoly. A title that we've looked at prior that dropped in 1983 before getting atomized in a lawsuit by Parker Brothers. I found this timing interesting as how was Anti-Monopoly able to win their suit against Parker Brothers while Gay Monopoly got obliterated? And what I was able to come up with was that Gay Monopoly was under fire for a completely different reason: copyright infringement. See, Anti-Monopoly was in violation of the trademark. It used the word monopoly not to say that it was anti the board game, it was anti the general economic concept of a monopoly. That word just happened to be under trademark when used as the title of a board game. Gay Monopoly, meanwhile, is not referring to a homosexual company that controls the market and barriers to entry. It is referring to a homosexual version of the Parker Brothers board game, which was done without the permission of the company, which is why they got eviscerated in the lawsuit. This also adds another layer to the Gay Monopoly lore, as when you look at the details of the game and the timing of its release, something really fishy starts to take shape. You see, the Monopoly trademark was finally found to be void in February of '83. This makes nationwide news, and everyone is quite shocked by this. Mysteriously, before the end of that same year, a title by the name of Gay Monopoly would release, claiming to be a celebration of gay life. Despite having quite a lot of effort poured into it, the game does contain errors in its trivia and effect cards, the scaling of its property prices, and in one case, an entire property not having a price at all, giving the impression that it was partially rushed. Additionally, despite containing many mechanics that separate it from the Parker Brothers game, it still chooses to use Monopoly in the title, which opens it up to the legal trouble that kills the game. Well, with all of this background information about what was happening to Monopoly at the time, I think I do now have an answer for all these questions. questions, as I think that Gay Monopoly's main purpose was to allow Fire Island Games to capitalize off of Monopoly losing its trademark by releasing a game that would catch the attention of the public, not realizing that while Parker had lost the trademark, they still had the copyright. This series of events answers so many of those questions. Why did it release in this time period? Because Monopoly's trademark was removed. Why does it contain so many blatant errors? Because its rushed production meant that it couldn't do proper quality control. And the big one, why did they use Monopoly in the title knowing that Parker Brothers would absolutely seek legal action? Because they thought that they could get away with it now that the trademark was invalid. This makes the whole thing even worse because now we know for sure that if they would have changed the name, they would have been fine because Parker Brothers didn't even have a trademark at that point. There was literally only one single way that they could have gotten into legal trouble, and they smacked that sucker into right field for Parker Brothers' easiest pop fly of their life. What Gay Monopoly did here was basically watch the patent for Claritin expire, put out a drug called Claritin 2, and then immediately get sent to the Shadow Realm for copyright infringement. Actively impressed that they managed to screw up the only point where they could have gotten away with this with no repercussions. All they had to do was walk in a straight line and they managed to trip, fall, and die. And that should bring to a close the complete saga and impact of Anti-Monopoly. At least, Anti-Monopoly 1. You heard that right, folks. It's Anti-Monopoly 2! Complete with its own entirely separate game, entirely separate issues, and entirely separate lawsuit against everyone's favorite board game buddy, the Hasbro Corporation. However, that will need to be a story for the next video to tell, as unless I split this up, there will be no uploads for over a month, and I will be the next one declaring bankruptcy. So until I see you there, keep in mind the Parker Brothers, and always remember to never put yourself in a situation where one bad call can lose you the game. Signing off for Remembering to Tip Your Senator, I am Cam Sandwich. Thank you for watching and have a fantastic day. A special thank you to my suppliers, staff, and chefs over at the deli, as well as the media preservers helping me get these rare games ported for the public to enjoy. If you'd like to join the crew, you can take a look using the link in the description below.
Luke, what's going on over there?
I'm doing the work. I'm doing everything.
You're way too scatterbrained. You are using way too many tools. You can get it all done with ClickUp. It houses your docs. You can share calendars. You can share files. You can chat with your team. You can video conference, and it's all powered with AI. Here, use ClickUp.
Oh, this is cool. What does this app do?
Everything.
Thanks.